So I'll kick it off. I'm Jess Almley. I've been working in learning and development for 30 years now, which means I've done all the jobs. So I started as an orientation coordinator, or if you want to go back even further, a trainer at McDonald's, and then moved all the way up to a vice president of learning. And I left my corporate role a couple of years ago and went out on my own. And I am really passionate about our profession shifting to work more strategically, more intentionally, and having a larger impact. And it's possible. And yes, Andrew's doing a commercial. Thank you, Andrew, for the book that I just released a little over a week ago on September 2nd, which was my Doom book, L&D Order Taker No More, Become a Strategic Business Partner. And that was published by ATD Press. So that's me. Andrew, your turn.
Thank you,
I
Jess.
can't do
Yeah.
a
So
commercial for you, though. I don't think I can
yeah,
hold anything
I
up.
don't have the book yet. I gotta get on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Andrew Barry, founder and CEO of Curious Lion. It's great to see some familiar faces in the audience, also a bunch of new faces. Yeah, I've been in L&D or running my business for 8 years, been in L&D for over 20 years, at KPMG before that mostly. And Mike Kennedy, what's up? Good to see you from those days. Yeah, and we're really excited to come together here to talk about the this. I mean, essentially, right? How to become more strategic. I hear this from every single one of our clients that we work with. I know Jess does too. That's probably why you wrote this book.
Part of it,
And
yeah.
today we're going to unpack why this is important, and we're going to start to talk about the how, because Jess has some incredible stuff. I've got her. Um, there's like an amazing assessment you should all check out as well. I'm gonna reference that a little bit. We've started to do some work with clients that's helping them become more strategic. I want to share a bit about that so you can start to implement some of those ideas. And like Jess said, we want to hear from you and hear from your questions and your challenges and your ideas as well. So Jess, let's just set the scene for everyone as well, how you and I both work with L&D.
Yeah. So I tend to work with learning and development or talent development teams or leaders. So specifically, so I'm kind of L&D or talent development for L&D and talent development. I'm very passionate about our profession, as I said before, shifting and changing the way that we work on a regular basis. So that's who I tend to work with and for. And then Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, so our clients are L&D teams, typically at like 1,000 to 5,000 person companies. And what we have been doing a lot in the last 12 months is helping them build cross-functional programs for ICs. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why ICs, why I think this is so important. I think for this purpose of this conversation, this is a big opportunity for any of you who are thinking about that population at your company, for you to start to show business impact. And we're going to unpack a little bit about what that means as well. So Jess, let's start with kind of the premise of your book, right? Like, and sort of this, the way that we this event is, we've called this the make or break AI moment, right? So like we want to address why
Hmm.
AI is impacting this as well. But
Yeah.
why is it important for us to develop these skills? Why are you seeing that important for your clients?
Yeah, and I think AI is bubbled up in every learning and talent development conversation. I feel like yesterday I was on a webinar and we didn't say the phrase or the acronym or whatever it is, AI, until the last 20 minutes. And I felt like we had then officially filled out our bingo cards. Like that was, but there's a reason, right? There's a reason why we're talking about it so much because it is huge and there is no role, learning and development, talent development, individual contributors, it doesn't matter who you are. There's no role that's going to be untouched when we think about AI and how it's going to change the way that we do work as in our world, really. I mean, I see some of you are nodding along here, so you're on the same page as me. But I think primarily, and why this is important for learning and development specifically to think about differently right now, is that AI is really going to replace a lot of our transactional work. And this is great because that is going to improve the efficiency of our organizations overall. But it also means we need to shift to work differently. I think it also offers us an opportunity to work in ways that we haven't been able to before because we've been tied down to transactional work. However, the problem comes in that right now, Many learning and development or talent development teams are built on reactive transactional work. That is how they function. That is how we are doing our work. So we're getting a request, we're receiving it, we're delivering on that training request. And oftentimes that's an e-learning or a video or something that we're sort of creating and then sending back out. Now, I don't want to create panic. That's not my, it's funny, Andrew, I interviewed David James for my podcast a couple of months ago, and he said, I don't want to be a doom merchant. And
Mm,
I definitely don't want to be a doom merchant either. But we're not going to be able to work the way that we work right now in the future. And I don't think this is going to happen tomorrow. I don't think it may even happen next year, but I think we need to start thinking about strategically what it means so that we can begin to make that change. Because a lot of the transactional requests for the in creating e-learnings and all of that, that's going to be able to be done by an AI. We, of course, will still need to validate, we'll need to look it over, make sure it is what's needed, but we may not necessarily be as involved in the day-to-day work of creating it. But
mm,
here's where I think the good news is that L&D has a skill set, or at minimum, we have the potential for a skill set, if we haven't developed it yet, that goes beyond creating training. And that is our ability to solve talent challenges, to identify and close skills gaps, and even solving for potential talent problems before they arise if we have access to the right information that we need in order to do so. And those are not transactional skills. And the need for that is not going away. Even if AI comes into our organizations and we are using it more on a regular basis, we are still going to have talent challenges in our organizations. And we, I believe, learning and development is the profession that can solve for these talent challenges and transform the talent in the organizations to be more effective. However, if we keep ourselves in this transactional box, if we don't begin shifting how we work, that's not going to happen. And so it is this narrative that is my whole book. That is this narrative between order taker and strategic business partner that is not new. It's been here for a while. It's just bubbled up more recently, which I think is fantastic. And the urgency, I believe, is increasing due to the emergence and advancement of AI in our workplaces. So
yeah.
that's where I'm coming from when I think about AI and L&D and sort of why we need to be paying attention, but what that means for us for the future of our work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what was so, like you said, it's not new. This isn't new, but
Mm-mm.
the introduction of AI into the workplace has created a unique opportunity for all of us. And I think that's what's so exciting about this. And so to bring in the perspective that I brought to this, and I think when Jess and I started talking, we're like, wow, this is really interesting because I think there's a lot that we build on in terms of what each other does. What I've started to see at clients, and I'll be totally honest with this, like this wasn't like some like spark of genius that I had 12 months ago. This was a client requesting something from us that we developed and delivered, and have got to this point now where it's like, oh, okay, that was actually solving a very interesting problem. And I think a lot of other companies have this problem. And so I'm going to unpack a little bit about what that is. And I mentioned it's focusing on IC. So basically, this client came and said to us, hey, we've got manager development covered. Like we are doing a great job here. We're turning them into really great coaches, but our individual contributors are still not able to manage up and sideways. And they're not
Mm-hmm.
able to drive impact on their own in quite the way we want them to. So can you help us with that? And we went through this journey of that for the last 12 months to figure out how to help them. We made a lot of mistakes at the beginning, but I think we've got to a point now that I'm really proud of, and I think it's doing an incredible. I mean, it's delivering incredible results to this client, and I think everyone can do this. And so I'm here to make this argument that you should be focusing more on your individual contributors. And I'll elaborate on that. But what's interesting is, when Jess and I are talking, we realized a lot of L&D folks are individual contributors. So a lot of these skills that we're going to be talking about are applicable to all of you and I mean, to me as well as a business owner and Jess. So what I mean by that is, and I think why you could be making a business case internally for your a focus. Almost like a renewed focus on your individual contributor population is the role of AI. So AI allows the individual. to do so much more on their own, right? Previously, you had to work with a lot of people to be able to just develop an idea. Now with AI, you can go from idea to prototype like in a week, you know? And so the new bottleneck is now we want to test these prototypes, right? If we can come up with so many different prototypes now, we want to be able to test them. And in a business, as anyone knows, to be able to do that, you've got to get people on board, right? You've got to enlist support to be able to do that. And so what we saw at this client was this big emphasis on this ability to influence without authority, right? And then, you know, and I look at Jess's assessments, and there's so much overlap between what she's talking about and what we're seeing in the work we're doing, where, you know, some examples here, like being able to communicate with stakeholders consistently in their preferred way. This is such a big unlock. Because so many people just you know communicate what they are thinking and not in a way that's going to resonate with the audience. That's a big shift we've been focusing on. Um, Negotiating with leaders for clarity and resource commitments, you know, and doing these things. We're going to talk about this a lot, Jess, like before you need that. So building those relationships, building that
Mhm.
support. And so yeah, I'll stop there. You know, our program equips ICs to do this. And I want to be able to show you over the course of this conversation and through events we're going to do after this as well, how you can do that as well and enable your ICs to start driving impact on their own and hopefully learn some of these skills yourself that you can apply in your role.
Yeah, what's interesting, Andrew, is that what you talked about and what I just talked about were both sort of the evolution of the transactional task, I would call it. I,
Yeah,
I mean, that's the word I tend to use a lot, and I don't think you use those words, but basically the things that aren't going away are the ability to form these relationships with your stakeholders,
yeah,
are the ability to negotiate, are that all of those pieces, that ability to lead up, down, and sideways. Those aren't necessarily things that AI can do. Those are those human, connective, collaborative skills that we need to capitalize on, both as learning and development professionals in our own work and in helping others to develop to do the same.
yeah.
Yeah, very much
You
so.
you touched on this at the beginning. Let's maybe start for the conversation here where you're like, this isn't anything new, right?
Mhm.
So why hasn't anything changed up to this point? Let's acknowledge some of the real like barriers and challenges to this shift.
Yeah, so when it comes to learning and development, I can speak from that side and why I don't believe it's changed yet. There's a couple of reasons, two things that I'll call out specifically. First one is that we have done our work this way for so long that that's what's accepted and expected by our
Mm,
stakeholders. Now, we in learning and development, we're thinking about, this, we can do way more than this. We're not limited to this. And so we're trying to think about different ways to work, but our stakeholders aren't. The last thing that they're thinking about in their day is, gosh, I wonder if L&D could be more effective. They have other things on their plates. And so we tend to approach it as first off, that if we just did our work differently, if we just do some things differently, then we'll be able to change. We'll be able to work more as strategic business partners. So we often approach it as a process change. And while I will say that, yes, a lot of our processes and the way we work needs to change in order to be more of a strategic business partner, this is much bigger than a process change. If we limit it to we only need to do our work differently, we are thinking much too small. Because our stakeholders don't see it this way, we are not it's not about us changing our process as much as it's about a mindset and cultural shift for the entire organization about how to work with learning and development. So
mm,
right now they see us as an order taker, they come to us, we fulfill that order, we do it beautifully, and so why would they think that anything is wrong or we need to do anything differently? Because that's
yeah,
not where they spend their time. The
yeah.
second thing, yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Sorry,
a
go ahead and keep
no, there's
going.
a second part to that, and it sort of flows into the first, which is I call it we are really masters in the art of unintentional self-sabotage. So it's
Mm,
unintentional because the things that we are doing we think are helpful, but oftentimes they are the things that are keeping us stuck in that order taking box. So, for example, we show up ready to help and please instead of ready to help be partners in problem solving. And when I show up ready to help you, and I'm like, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? And I have my people pleaser hat on, I'm going to do whatever you ask of me. My goal is to please you, to make you happy. My goal is not first and foremost to solve the problem, although that's maybe what I would like to be doing, but it doesn't show up that way. This every time we take and deliver on an order exactly as requested, we just reinforce that that's how you work with us, and we think we've been helpful. We assume that someone else has vetted the solution. So when our stakeholders come to us, and this happened to me too in my role, and they'd even use our language. Oh, people don't know how to do this, or they don't have the skills they need for this. And we'd say, oh, okay, great. Well, the reality, what I found was that most of my stakeholders were so overwhelmed and their plates were so full that when they'd come and say, we need training, they hadn't really fully vetted that that would actually solve the problem. And then what happened, and maybe some of you on this call, this has happened to you as well. What would happen is we would fulfill that training request. And then I would get back, I would sit down with someone and they'd say, well, your training wasn't good enough. It didn't solve the problem. Well, it never would have solved the problem in the first place. But
Yeah.
they were convinced that it would at the beginning. So then not only did we waste our time and resources and we created something fantastic, but we dinged our credibility doing what we thought was the right thing. So we assuming
Mm.
somebody else has vetted the solution, we keep our measures surface level. And I think measures are something we want to talk about, Andrew, probably, but the our measures that we use, because it's the easiest thing to find, those activity measures, we lean on those. They tell everybody that we're busy. We're doing a lot of things, but for what? And
Mm.
then the other thing is we tend to fall in love with our work first instead of business improvement first. So we
Mm.
love the work we do. We're passionate about it and we want to lead with that. But really what's most important is business improvement. So we need to lead with the business improvement and bring our learning expertise along for the ride and plugging it in where needed. So those are just a couple of the ways. I talk
Yeah.
about many more, but they're things that we think we're doing well and we think they're helpful, but actually it's just keeping us in that box.
Yeah.
So that's why I think we haven't changed yet. Those two things.
Those are awesome points. I want to follow up on one. I'd like to hear as well from folks that are with us today. What are some of the challenges you're experiencing in making the shift? What are the roadblocks? What are the obstacles? If you have something you want to share, just put that in the chat so we can get some additional context. But I want to just while folks are thinking about that, the point you made about framing the problem. This is such a key skill set in our IC programs. Figuring out the right problem to solve is like more than half the battle. And if you and I think this maps to what we're going to talk about with when I share a bit more about our programs is I was actually just talking to someone now, a learning consultant at Elucidat this morning, and he was saying the same thing that their clients still look, for the most part, look at learning as a scale problem. Like, how do we create programs that reach the most people and deliver the most impact? And that's kind of always been the way, right? A lot of the programs I've been involved in have been about scale. How do we get as many people as possible trained up on whatever it is? And the problem with that is it's so difficult to measure that impact. There's so many other factors that go into something when you're operating at that scale. And what we were saying was we need to, and this is what our programs do, we need to start to shift that conversation to what is actually the smallest, like the minimum viable cohort of people that you can impact with something really that's going to really move the needle for them and the business. And I will talk more about an example of that in a sec. I see Becky has a question here for you, Jess. What about amping up our alignment to get leaders to buy into the new box?
Yeah. I mean, Andrew, I think you and I can probably both speak to alignment, both for ICs and for L&D. At least I know we've talked about it before in previous conversations.
Yeah.
But alignment has to come first. One of the things I hear quite frequently, and I feel like Becky is is going to be right alongside me on this one, but I hear very often is our executives just don't understand what learning and development is going to do. Why can't we get buy-in for them? Why can't we get our seat at the table? And to me, that's the wrong question. Because if we are trying to convince somebody of what our perspective is, we're taking the wrong angle. We need to look at what's their perspective. What are they working on? What's the
Yeah.
most important to them? I think, Jay, you said it kind of as a follow-up here. You said translating what's keeping the C-suite awake at night. And then we look at that. We look at what are those biggest strategic initiatives? What is that? What are they trying to accomplish? And we say, this is how we're going to play a part in accomplishing that as learning and development. This is how learning and talent development, this is how we can solve those talent challenges. That's what drives our strategy, not the other way around. So, yeah, Becky, it's not us coming up with this idea of, hey, we think that it'd be great to have leadership development. Or one person comes to us, one leader, hey, nobody knows how to have crucial conversations in this company. Well, is maybe that's true? I don't know. But is that what's most important to the C-suite at this moment? That's where
Mm.
we should focus our efforts first. And so I think, Andrew, when you talk about it, oftentimes you talk about it in relation to KPIs. And
Yeah,
maybe you want to say a little bit about that in terms of individual
yeah.
contributors.
Yeah, let's go there. And just to echo this point as well about
Let's go there.
the yeah, the alignment is something that again I said this earlier, like do this before you need that person. Go, we teach a tool, and by the way, for everyone here, and we're gonna probably run some of our IC sessions as open enrollment sessions for L&D. So so keep an eye out for that. It'll come in the next few weeks. The first one we'll do is a tool that we teach called narrative dialogue for doing just this, figuring out what is that person's perspective. You mentioned that word, Jess. So key, understanding the different perspectives of the different functions and the different business leaders of those functions, to then be able to align. This alignment isn't this magic thing that you do like turn on a switch. It's something that involves a lot of prep up front. So I just want to call that out. But yeah, so I mean, this is, I think, the most meaty thing I can share with all of you, and that is this shift that we've started to go through as a company with our clients. So where we're able to deliver a huge, well, our client is be able to deliver a huge impact to their business is by working. So two things: identifying business OKRs that they can impact. Jess, you talk a lot about business acumen as one of the sort of buckets of your assessment, and then identifying cross-functional teams of ICs that are working on that OKR. Okay, so I'm going to give an example here just to illustrate this. I've already addressed why ICs, right? I think they are becoming more and more irreplaceable at companies. Not everyone wants to be a people manager. AI is enabling people to do so much more on their own. So IC is going to become more and more valuable. And I think it's an opportunity for L&D to go, okay, we're going to develop these ICs. And here's how we do that. Find an OKR that is a big priority for your business. Identify the functional teams that are going to be supporting that OKR or responsible for achieving it, right? So maybe it's like product engineering, product marketing, customer success, right? And then identify the individual contributors on those teams. And so you want to get typically a cohort of 25, 30 people like that. At that point, then you bring your full toolkit as a performance consultant, right? Because now you know what the end goal is. You know who the people are that are working on that end goal. And you can go into that performance consulting mindset mode and figure out what are the skills they're going to need to achieve that, right? So maybe it's discovery. They're gonna have to do some customer discovery. So we're gonna do some interviewing skills and how to ask better questions. Then they're gonna do some data analysis to figure out, once they've got all that information. So we're gonna do some critical thinking and structured thinking to help them process that. And then they've got to pitch the idea at the end. So we do some communication training on it. Now imagine you run this cohort through those skills while that team is actually working on the OKR, right? So they get to practice what you're teaching and the frameworks you're sharing while they are doing the actual work. At the end of all of that, what we've been able to do, again, our clients have been able to do, is to show business impact in this way. You do, I'm going to put a blog post out about this pretty soon as well, by the way, but you do self-assessments to figure out skill improvements. Okay. So we're all familiar with that. So I am now more confident in being able to do this skill and this skill and this skill. So you've got that one data point. We often like get tripped up in trying to prove correlation and causation with one data point. What I'm going to suggest is that you need to look at a matrix of data points and then apply common sense. Okay. So the first one is self-assessment. The second is talk to their managers and get them to observe or testify to that behavior change. Okay, so now you've got a third party corroboration of that. Then you look at actual application of the skills that you're teaching on the work. So this is anecdotal stuff. This is my favorite part because you get to interview people and figure out, hey, we use this whole brain thinking model to communicate better in this presentation we did to this person, and this was the impact of that. So now you've got specific examples of application. Okay. The fourth thing is network. Simple as the cohort that's coming in. How many of the other people in the cohort do you know now? And then you do that at the end. How many people do you know? Right? We all know that if you build relationships with people, you eventually start to build trust and you build an understanding of where they're coming from. And if you're doing that cross-functionally, you start to push towards that enterprise mindset that a lot of the companies are asking their people to do, right? So that's a big part. And then finally, the fifth one is you look at the OKR itself. What are the metrics that are already being tracked there? What are the key results? What progress has been made to those? And at that point, make a common sense argument that you've contributed to that. Because how could you not have, right? If all the people working on that project have improved their skills, their managers have has testified to that, you've got actual examples of them applying it on the work that needed to get done, and they've improved their network and they know more of each other and work better together. You've definitely impacted that OKR, and to me, this is such an important opportunity now for us to go in and work with these smaller cohorts of ICs on very defined problems and help them achieve that, and then just repeat that. And I can talk about the scale piece and all that as well. But yeah, that's kind of how we are measuring that business impact, Jess.
Yeah, one thing that I think is interesting about what you just talked about, even in tying it to the KPIs and measuring it to the impact, the piece that's standing out to me is the starting small piece, the starting small with one particular area or one particular KPI. And how I think that translates into the work that we're doing as learning and development is, and a couple people kind of pulled this out that like these are great ideas, but there's like so much work to be done, and there's skills that we need to develop. I think somebody mentioned here. I'm sorry if I'm not seeing who it is right at the moment. Oh, I don't know how to say your name. Akil. A couple things, skills we need to develop, but we don't necessarily have the credibility to do that at this
Mm,
point. The key to that is this starting small concept. So a lot of times, I talk about what's one thing that you can add when you're doing and responding to a project or you're working on something right now that can crack the door just a tish to show that there's something else, some additional value that you can add that you maybe haven't added before. So is it as something as simple as asking questions that you haven't asked before about business outcomes? And maybe the first time you do that, the stakeholder that you're talking to is going to look at you like you're crazy and say, why do you want to know about my business outcomes? I asked you to create training. Isn't that what you do? Just do that.
mm,
Because that's happened to me
right.
before too. But the key is that we start very small and maybe we even sneak it in. So even when it comes to measurement, let's say we weren't asked to provide any measurement or tie to the KPIs or anything at the end, but we do it anyway. And we sneak it in and then we show, hey, do you know what? This relates to this KPI in this way. And we built it
Yeah,
actually intentionally for that. That then is a way that we start to crack the door because we are talking about not a process change, but a cultural and mindset shift, which takes time and happens little by little. And so I
yeah,
think as you think about KPIs and then we think about this, these are a lot of big changes to make. That small piece is really key in terms of we see the outcome that we want to get to, but we can only get there one step at a time. It's like we've got a really big staircase. We can't jump that staircase in one jump. We have to take one small step at a time.
yeah. I think that's super advice. And Becky's also, I think this is a great point on what you're saying is then it becomes a storytelling, right? Like, can you tell that story credibly that you've impacted or contributed to that business impact? And I think when you start to pull together that data that I listed, right? Like, how could you not be like that? It's so common sense at that point. And then Jess, it's such a great point is just start small, start to do that, sneak it in there if you have to, and start to build that credibility over time.
And then Becky mentioned something too. She mentioned storytelling, finding a supporter and build from here. I mean, I'm big on who are your influencers and champions in the
Mm,
organization. And if those are people, because there's probably somebody, it may not be everybody, but I have even before. done a pilot program with one particular area that maybe they were more influencers and champions. They were willing to try something different. And then we get them talking about it. And so it's not me telling the story to the other stakeholders about what works. In fact, I even at one point had a stakeholder where I said, she asked me a question about our onboarding. And I said, it's really been interesting, the onboarding that we shifted just slightly with the contact center, and they've had some really great success. If you want to ask them about it, I bet they can tell you more. I mean, I intentionally didn't even tell her our results. And the contact center, she went to them, which I was hoping she would do. She didn't tell me. And she came back and she goes, you know what? They're really excited about it. They said the confidence measures have increased, their time to resolution has decreased. Like she mentioned all these measures that I
Yeah.
knew about, but I didn't tell the story. That champion told the story. And so
Yeah. Good point.
that's a great point as well. And that goes back to Andrew, this building partnerships, building relationships, and doing it small, just a little
Yeah.
bit at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so I love I mean, it's all stories, right? Like our programs are successful when that word of mouth starts to spread and a wait list starts to develop for it. And I think that these are sort of, as I'm saying this now, realizing some of the benefits of running it at a small size, right? It's like you start to create this like a buzz, people are like, what is this program?
Mhm.
Like this is very different. Like, and yeah, that word of mouth builds, people start to apply for the next cohort. You've got this waitlist building. It's an incredible momentum thing for an organization. And yeah, I'm curious at this point what questions any of you have about this. Has anybody tried something similar? Had any experience doing this? Anything coming up for anyone that they want to ask?
Kayla, I love your building out use cases and case studies of how you made an impact and always having it ready. Um, that was one of the strategies we definitely employed in when I was able to move my own team from this place where they were order takers to one where they were strategic business partners. And part of it is if you can't tell the story of what you do, how can you expect that somebody else knows what it is? And so we were very much, we had a playbook, if you will. And part of that playbook, I called it an external playbook, but it wasn't necessarily anything that we pushed across the table to our stakeholders or emailed them. It was just more talking points like, if you work with us, this is what that means. It's what it looks like. And here's the results we typically get, which means we had to be ready to know what results we typically got. And this is what you can expect. And if you have questions, here's a project that we worked on recently. Feel free to ask these leaders about it. And so that is a key of like we can't expect that somebody else just figures it out, but we have to know it too. And that's a key piece. I think sometimes we don't take the time to document, and then therefore
Hmm.
it maybe we know it in our heads, but even if we know it, if we want to work with a whole team that's telling that story, the whole team needs to know the story, right? So
Mhm.
that they're talking with a stakeholder and I'm talking with a stakeholder and they're hearing the same things. Your typical results are XYZ or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
I can see Kayla nodding or case
Yeah,
study.
and Tony, you bring up an interesting point that it must start with your department leader being the executive sponsor. I would also push on that to say like you can support them with a lot of the evidence to be able to make that shift. I'm curious if there's anything you want to add to your comment there in the chat.
Sure. I think part of it is I've had the same CPO at two different companies, and she came from a background with leadership development. She stood up the Boeing Academy, and so I think having somebody that comes from that part of HR is really helpful
Mm,
because she understands the function. Um, so, for example, at a different company, I worked with a CPO who traditionally, like her career started as a recruiter and she knew the talent acquisition piece very well. And then, all the other things that come with being a CPO, but she was not as keen on the learning function. And so I really had to advocate to her. So advocating up and like
yeah,
a lot of this is what you all are talking about. That's where I think
yeah.
your storytelling and your case studies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's advocating up. I mean, that is a great way to describe the skill set. Yeah, And it's a lot of these things we talk to influencing without authority. And that this is 100% a learnable skill. Like I've seen this now for the past 12 months. Like it's, which is, yeah, again, that is the huge opportunity for all of us now in L&D.
You know, that advocating or leading up is something too, Andrew, that is really important for individual contributors to learn as well. And so that plays along with the same. That's where a lot of these skills
Yeah.
really overlap between learning and development and individual contributor. I can tell the leading up thing even from the perspective of somebody who was in a senior leader seat. I mean, I never wanted to be sitting in a meeting where somebody said, your team is working on this. What does that mean? Now, I didn't need to be micromanaging in their moment day to day, but I needed to have the stories and the data and the information and the case studies of what was going on. I didn't want to be caught off guard. And so I always tried to make it so that my leader, whoever that was the same. Like they kind of knew the big
Mm,
picture of what was happening in our organization, in our department, and what the major metrics are we were tracking and where we were at and what the biggest projects were and all of that. So we could be leading up, I could be leading up to that person as well. And so just
yeah.
thinking about how do you equip the person who you're reporting to have the information they need to advocate for you in the circles where you don't sit, is the
Mm.
way I always used to think about it.
Every L&D team and leader should have you in their back pocket, Jess. What a I love that, and it's often like it's often easy to be that as like the outside perspective, right? Where it's hard when you like we acknowledge this, all of us, yeah. Like when you're in the seat and you're having to navigate this yourself, it's really hard. I mean, yeah, I mean, I have tons of coaches I work with. It's so
And
valuable to have,
having to navigate all the personalities. I
right?
mean, I think it's easy for us to say it sort of as a blanket statement, but then I work with individual leaders and L&D teams, and they're working with challenging personalities because that's the way of the world. We've all got somebody like that that's really a tough nut to crack
Yeah,
in some way, shape, or form. And so
yeah,
it does become very nuanced across different scenarios, but I think the primarily those main concepts stay true, if you
yeah,
will. Andrew, I know we're kind of coming up on our
yeah,
time. Was there anything that we should share here at the end
yeah.
that we want to make sure that that these folks can leave with?
Yeah, so yeah, you and I both chatted about this. We wanted to offer something of value to all of you as a thank you for coming to join us today. From my side, what I have been doing with clients is a 30-minute sort of strategy review of your IC learning paths. So if you think there is opportunity to make more impact with your individual contributors. If you think and you're hearing from the business that they need to be driving more impact, I have a list of questions I go through. We kind of run through those in 30 minutes, and at the end of that, I can give you a bunch of uh, sort of advice and tips on what I'm seeing work at some of our other clients. And a lot of these things you can implement right away, which is really awesome. So if you're interested in that, my Santi from my team is going to drop my LinkedIn in the chat quickly. Thanks, Santi. You guys can just message me on there. Just say you're interested in a learning path review, and I'll get that set up with you early next week. Yeah. What about you, Jess?
So yeah, I can put my LinkedIn in there as well, although I think quite a few folks here on here are already connected with me. And I was not as prepared as you, Andrew, to have it ready, so I'm pulling it up right now, the link, which is something I should have learned by now because I've been talking to enough people that that should be something. And then the other thing is that the assessment that Andrew has been referencing is something that you can pull up and pull up for free right now and take. It is a assessment that will kind of, it's meant to be a corresponding assessment to the book, to be reading the book, but what it tells you is which of the areas maybe you want to focus on most, maybe where there's some ideas for you to focus on in terms of, is it upping your business acumen? Is it building stronger partnerships? Is it being more strategic in what you say yes and no to and how to do that? So there's a lot of different things that you can just take and get some ideas and or know which chapters of the book, if you decide to read that you want to dive into. And so those
Yeah.
are that's something I can offer all of you here today as well. And I believe,
Yeah,
Andrew, we'll follow up with everyone and we can send these links
I
in
was
an
just gonna
email.
say, and we should include Steve's take. I'm gonna save this
Yes,
chat
we
because Steve,
should.
I don't know how you are doing this, but this is amazing. Like you're pulling everyone's comments from the chat and adding additional value and references to that. So we'll collect all this up. Steve, you're a legend. All of you're amazing. Thank you so much for coming to today's conversation. This is just the beginning. Jess has so many great things as well through her book, and she's running book clubs and all these other things. We're going to start running some of our sessions for all of you to try. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah, as just, and we'll share the recording out as well for folks who missed this. Also, if you want to see the playback.
Thank you
All right.
all. This is a brilliant group. And yeah, let's definitely pull all of Steve's, which he's still adding.
Yeah,
Steve,
no.
we need to keep you on so you can keep adding more things. And then we'll send a follow-up. We can grab I believe, can we save the chat? We can
Yeah,
all save the
I
chat
think.
right now. So
Yeah,
if you grab the top three those little dots at the top where it saved chat, if you want to do that yourself right now, feel free because then you can get all of Steve's resources and links and everything too. But we'll also
yeah,
send them out after this, Andrew. Yeah.
yep, 100%.
Okay.
Thank you, Jess. That was a ton of fun.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Andrew. Thank
everybody.
you, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah.